do is to get the PowerPoint ready, Joe.
Yep. First of all, are you happy for people to stay unmuted and ask questions, or would you like people to wait until there's a space?
Any time will do.
Okay. All right. So what you need to do is to press the green button that says share screen.
All right. First I have to get it.
No, you don't.
Along the bottom.
Okay, along the bottom, the green one.
You've taken yourself out.
Okay.
And then you need, have you pressed that one, the green button? Then you need to press the blue one that says share.
There's your Zoom.
Have you got the green one yet, Danny?
Blue one, right? Yep.
Yep.
Share.
Okay, good. Now you find your PowerPoint.
I got there.
And
Yep, and open it up.
Yep.
Okay, now you go to slideshow up the top.
Just here. What's there?
Keep going up. Yep, that one. And then from beginning on the left-hand side.
Yep.
There you go.
I want to get rid of these people over here.
Get rid of
Yes, you up the top of your screen where those little buttons are above my head probably. If you press just that little single line, it will get rid of them. The first one of the 4 buttons up the top.
Okay, all set to go. So, welcome everybody to words, quirky words. Now, not all the words will be quirky. So if you have a particular word that you like and you think it's quirky, please share it with us. But first of all, we'll start with a very quirky word, which is quirky.
Yeah.
Various dictionaries have different definitions, but I like the one from the Merriam-Webster on their online dictionary. Unusual and especially an interesting or appealing way. And of course, you also get the noun quirk, quirkiness, adjectives, quirkish, and the adverb quirkily. Now, the thing about Merriam-Webster is that they give a lot of detail about words when you look them up, and one of the details they give is when the word first entered the language, and for quirky it was 1873. Now, there's no doubt that it would have been used orally well before then, but the first written evidence they can find of it is in 1873. And Merriam-Webster also give you a list of other words which appeared in the same year. And some of them are very interesting because they seem to be earlier than you'd expected or later than you would expect. For instance, in 1873, we have the first example of airman. This is 30 years before the Wright brothers got off the ground, but I suppose they were talking about balloonists at the time. Other words, globetrotter, switchboard, euthanize, and jigsaw, and phrases like do or die, odd man out, rubber stamp. But my favourite from 1873 is an American word, bum-fuzzled. Now, they reckon it's probably an alteration of befuddled and bamboozled. Now, I particularly like bamboozle, one of my favourite words. We used to have a cat called Bamboozle. And bamboozle is a fairly ancient word. It comes from late in the 17th century. In 1703, the author Jonathan Swift wrote an article he called On the Continual Corruption of Our English Tongue. And he complained of, quote, the choice of certain words invented by some pretty fellows. And he gave those examples, bamboozle and sham. And he also gave a couple of words which already existed, which had new meanings. Bubble was a new slang term for a dupe, and put, P-U-T, a new slang word for a fool. And I'm very glad to see that bamboozle and sham have lasted over 3 centuries. And finally, from 1873, surprising word which surprised me by being so late, wordsmith. Let's go on to quirk with its various meanings. The third one, I can't understand that. I don't know why a groove is called a quirk. Anyway. And quirk comes from 1565. And some words which came from the same year: abracadabra, dilapidated, piggyback, potato, tombstone, and squash. My favourite phrase from 1565, sparkling wine.
I agree with that.
Now, the other thing about quirk and quirky is that there are very few words which begin with Q-U-I-R. The Macquarie Dictionary has only 3 of them, and I could only find 4 altogether. You'd be familiar with choir. Comes from the Latin word quaterni, with a quat meaning 4. So quaterni was a set of 4. Evidently, they used to fold the 4 leaves over and make 8. And then later on it became 24 sheets, and I believe it's now 25 sheets, which I presume was done because it's 25 would make it times 4, make it decimal. A quirl is used in the Midlands of England and also around Boston, and it's simply a variation of curl, with perhaps the influence of coil in there as well. It's very rare in the USA, but evidently it's still used in the Midlands of England. Why? I don't know. It hasn't been explained. Quiquencho is a Spanish word for a species of armadillo. And quirt also comes from the Spanish word cuerda, meaning cord. A quirt is a whip used in southern USA, Mexico, and Latin America. Now, I like to go on to quirk with a capital Q. In other words, it's a surname. So where did quirk come from? Actually from the Isle of Man. There are quite a few quirks who live around the Burnie area. I know quite a few of them. Whether they know that they are descended from Manx people, I don't know, but the quirk.
Some quirks have got, as a surname, have got the E on the end, Danny. That's just a mannerism, is it, or is it different?
Oh, yeah, just somebody spelled it a bit differently.
Yeah.
150 years ago, saying it's just kept going.
Yep.
Yeah, so son of Cork, the quirk. And what the Manx people did was, unlike the Scotch and the Irish, they took the M off. And so with McWilliam, take the M off and you get Quilliam. And quite a few Quilliams are part of the world as well, particularly up Circular Head. And McWalter, you take the M off and you get Quilter. Now another name around Burnie that I'm very familiar with, people I know, are called snooks, which I always found a very quirky name. So what is a snook? And why would the family be called snooks? Now the bottom one, the fish, comes from a Dutch word. So I think we can forget that one. So either the snookses of Burnie had ancestors who came from a pointy headland or had a pointy nose. I don't know.
It used to be called cocking a snook, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, that's another way it's used. Yeah. What made me think about it, looking it up, was interested in the derivation of the game of snooker and see if it had any connection. But if you look up snooker, dictionary is liable to say OU, origin unknown. But We do know where the game of snooker came from. It was in India, about the 18th or middle of the 19th century, and it was a variation on billiards. And we know that the raw recruits who just arrived from England were known to the old hands, the old members of the army there, as snookers. So I suspect that they were called snookers possibly because arriving in a new land and knowing nothing about it, they were very curious, and so they were very nosy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's my opinion anyway. Okay, now, so we'll leave quirky words unless somebody wants to come in now and tell us if they've got a quirky word that they'd like to share with us. No, I'll go on. Now, in my blurb for words, and more words, the two sessions I've done before, I mentioned that I was going to talk about the naming of the shrew. And I didn't, on both occasions because I ran out of time. But I'll do it now, so I'll make sure I've got the time. And this is where I get a lot of the information from this book, A Curious History of Latin Names. So, what is a shrew?
Yep.
And the slang term originally in the middle of the 13th century applied to both men and women. And within 150 years, men had been relieved of that, and it was given entirely to the women. We have to remember, of course, that in the 14th century, the belief in witches was very strong. I'll give you some synonyms for a shrew. Virago, dragon, termagant, vixen, cat, fishwife, witch, hellcat, she-devil, tartar, spitfire, hag, gorgon, paragon, fury, ogress, harpy, and my favourite, battle axe.
Mind you, I reckon you'd describe. I wouldn't use this. You wouldn't describe the same woman as a battle axe and a shrew, would you? Now,
Not well. I hope nobody would through these days. Of course, the fact is, the reputation of a shrew is it's unearned, it's unfair, and the shrew has been an animal which is completely misunderstood. I'll give you a few facts about what shrews are. There are 385 species of shrew. Find them everywhere in the world except for 3 places: Australia, New Zealand, and New Guinea. Well, that's the information that you get from the internet. I wonder whether there are any species on the Pacific Islands. But anyway, they have a lifespan of 14 months. They're the 4th most successful mammal family. The most successful are mice. There are over 700 species of mice. Mm. The 2nd most are the hamsters, moles, and things like that. And the 3rd are the bats. And the shrews are the 4th most successful. They eat between 50% and 200% of their body weight every day. And they have to eat every 2 to 3 hours. They can't hibernate, because they have to keep eating. So what they do is have the ability to reduce their body weight by 30%, and they can reduce their brain weight by 20%. So rather remarkable animals. There are other orders in the shrew family, like tree shrews, otter shrews, elephant shrews, West Indian shrews, and so on and so on. So how come the shrew got this shocking reputation? Well, it goes right back to the ancient Greeks. Aristotle, for instance, regarded the shrews as venomous. Some of them are. Some of them have a groove in the tooth. Their teeth point forwards. So they have some of them have a groove in the tooth, and it's red, which is actually iron oxide. But they would have thought that the redness came from blood, and so they were regarded as venomous and very dangerous.
Mm.
By the 16th century, there was a disease which was known as shrew strike. If you were shrew struck, it meant that a shrew had crawled over your back and had either bitten you or simply passed on its venom.
Mm.
And, they had various remedies for this. One was to get an ash tree, drill a hole in the ash tree, put in a live shrew, put the plug in, and then later on cut off a branch and apply the branch to a person who was believed to be shrew struck. Now, there's no details about how actually they did apply the branches, but maybe they just rubbed them over a person and tried to get rid of the poison. I suspect that the shrew struck people were those who were suffering mental illness at the time.
Mm.
Another cure was to cut off the tail of a shrew, burn it, and then spread the ash over a person, the wound of a person who had been bitten by a rabid dog. And it's believed that this is the origin of the nursery rhyme, Three Blind Mice. The word shrewd, with a D on the end, came in the 14th century. Back then it meant wicked and dangerous. Later on it turned into cunning, and by the 16th century it had become astute. Now we turn to the classification, and why I'm talking about the shrew like this is that the scientific name of the shrew is very confusing.
We have shrewd too, don't we?
What one's that?
Shrewd?
Shrewd, yep.
Shrewd.
With a D on the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the genus Sorex, that comes from it's Latin, that comes from the Greek word sorico. It's believed that the Greeks called the animal sorico because it's onomatopoeic. It's like that. It's like the sound that the animal made. The Romans in Latin came sorex, and the species has come Sorex araneus. Now this is the common shrew, or the Eurasian shrew, the one which is known throughout Europe. So Sorex for the shrew, araneus means spider. We called it the spider shrew. In Old English, it came into from Northern Europe as shrewer. In French, the shrew is mus araignea, mus for mouse, and araignea for spider. And they called it spider shrew because they thought it was as poisonous as a spider. But then if we look at the French word for mouse, it is souris, which comes from sorex. So you see what they've done? They've taken the word from shrew and called it a mouse. And the musaraignea, the spider mouse, is actually the shrew. So the scientists got it all back to front. And it all goes back to the father of scientific names, Linnaeus. He called it Sorex araneus. He was the one who came up with the name. And that would have been in 1758. So even as late as then, the shrew still had a very poor reputation. Now in this book that I showed you, a lot of other interesting information about scientific names. For instance, there's a plant called the Oxford ragwort. And its scientific name is Senecio squalidus, which means dirty old man. Why it got that name, I don't know. Primula You know the plant, the flower Primula vulgaris, which means first common girl. In modern times, we get some very unusual names given to species when they found the new species of butterfly was found about 50 years ago, and it was given the name charismatic. And there was another another butterfly which couldn't have looked anywhere near as good as the charismatic, and that was called Inglorious Mediocris. There was a new species or fossil of a trilobite, would have been found sometime around 1977, because that was the year, I think, in which the film, the first film in the Star Wars series came out. And this new fossil was named after one of the characters in Star Wars. So it's a trilobite called Han Solo. Now, do you know of any name, any animal name without a vowel? A-E-I-O-U.
Do you count Y?
Which one?
You count Y as a U, as a vowel, or fly.
Not on this occasion, no, but you're right, it's Y. The one is lynx, L-Y-N-X.
And a fly.
Yeah, fly, yes, yeah. Now, the thing about a lynx is that it's the very quintessence of a lynx. Therefore, its scientific name is lynx. And lynx comes from the Greek word luk, which meant light. And it's called a lynx because they have very keen eyesight. And there are quite a few other scientific names which are double-barreled. For instance, gorilla. On the understanding, I suppose, you can't get any more gorilla-ish than a gorilla.
Rattus.
Yeah, Rattus is a
Rattus. Yes. Iguana. Gorilla, by the way, came from an African word. The Greeks took it over and used it to describe a wild or hairy man. Iguana. I wonder if Cole knows the name of the scientific name of the Manx shearwater.
Petrodoma. No, I don't.
Well, it's a ridiculous name. It could surprise you. It's called a puffinus.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, puffinus. And there's Puffinus pacifica to the whole family. Yeah, okay. And our cassowary is Cassowarius.
My understanding is that the Manx shear with this particular bird was originally called a puffin, and therefore it's got the scientific name of puffinus. And then later on, a whole new species of bird was given the name puffin, and so they had to give the original puffin a different name, so they called it a shearwater, and it came from the Isle of Man, but it still kept its scientific name of puffinus.
Okay.
Right, to finish this section, I'd just like to suggest that if you want to find the very quintessence of a rotten, dirty, eating leader, I would put forward the scientific name Trumpus.
Let's hope he trumps himself and doesn't get in.
I just want to come in here before you finish shrew, going back to Reese's comment about battle axe and shrew. For me, it's interesting how gendered terms can be. So a woman is called a shrew and a man is called a curmudgeon, but you wouldn't call a man a shrew or a woman a curmudgeon. So there's that sense that you immediately got a sense that a word belongs to a certain gender.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah.
Mm.
Even bitch, although bitch has been taken by the gay community.
Yes, that's a different...
Right, before I go on to the next section, I want to call upon your help in a rescue mission. There are two words which are on death row. They don't deserve to die. I know that words are being born and dying all the time, but these two words have been extremely useful for centuries, and they deserve to live on and on and on. But they're in mortal danger. And here they are. Now, I listen to Radio National a lot, hear a lot of people talking, various shows on Radio National. I think in the last 2 years, I have heard extreme only once, and that was 16 months ago. I did see it surprisingly in print. The only time the last 2 years, only 9 days ago, the word was used in the Victorian roadmap that they put out on the Sunday week ago.
Mm-hmm. And
extremely, don't think I've heard that on the radio for at least 2 years.
Wow.
So, Danny,
These are excellent words.
Wants to ask a question.
sorry? No, I'd suggest extremist, the noun form, still has some currency though.
Extreme. Yep, I haven't heard it though. So,
Haven't you? Oh.
Now said extremist.
oh, extremist. Oh, yes, yes. Now, how did it come about? Well, there are two words which are absolute villains and which have taken over completely the airwaves and speaking all around the world. These are the two villains.
Mm.
Cannot listen to the radio or listen to people talking down the street say without hearing incredible hundreds of times a day and incredibly as well. And the problem is that English being such a rich language, all the words which are used as, could be used as synonyms for incredible, terrific, wonderful, marvellous, sensational, glorious, and so on, you don't hear them anymore. Very rarely do you hear them because these two words have taken over.
Mm.
I think, I wonder if in the whole history of the English language, whether two words like this have dominated to such an extent. You hear them spoken by professors of English, you hear them by scientists, you hear them by radio commentators. You just cannot turn on the radio without hearing incredible dozens and dozens of times every day. So what I'm hoping is that you will join with me and try to use words such as extreme and extremely as much as you can. And for that, I, for one, will be extremely grateful.
And unprecedented is taken over from some of these other words.
I was going to say the same thing, Cole. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, Danny?
Yeah.
With you're saying extreme, what about when the weather people say extreme heat and things?
Yeah.
Is that not
Oh, no, I can't remember hearing it. Maybe I have, but it's just passed me by. Yeah, but
okay.
yep,
The weather people do talk about extreme weather events
They do,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot of times, yeah.
That the recent typhoons in America have both been, and the fires, they've all been
Yeah.
described as extreme weather events.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now they often get referred to as unprecedented, once in 100 years events. You know, that's become a catchphrase as well. Everything's once in 100 years now. You know, so yeah.
oh, good on the weathermen then for
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
One big change I've noticed in my lifetime, and it looks as though it's become permanent, is a change in intransitive verbs becoming transitive,
Yeah.
as in appeal the decision. It used to be appeal against the decision, and protest the decision instead of protest against the decision. I've heard this on the ABC countless times.
Mm.
Okay, well, I'll go on to the next section. As promised in the blurb, common words which have something of a surprising origin. Now, blurb, for instance, you know where blurb comes from? It's one of those rare words that we know exactly who created it and exactly when it was created. It was an American humorist by the name of Gillette Burgess, and he introduced it in 1914. Actually, he'd used it before in an earlier book. He had a picture of a girl, and he called the girl Miss Blender Blurb. That's Blender without an E in it. So whether it's Miss Blender or Blinder, I'm not sure. Anyway, he liked inventing words. One which he invented, which has lasted, is bromide. He got it from the Greek bromos, which means a stink. It's a non-metallic element which inevitably has got a smell to it. But a couple of others which he tried to introduce which didn't catch on, it's a pity. One was awful, OOFLE, awful, and that is a person whose name you can't remember. And another one was flugy jab. A flugy jab is something that sounds like a compliment but has a sting in the tail.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what a pity they didn't last. Yeah. Now, here's a blurb. This could very well be the best blurb I've ever come across. It's written by Dylan Thomas, the Welsh poet, about the Irish novelist Flann O'Brien's novel At Swim Two Birds. And Dylan Thomas wrote, "This is just the book to give your sister, if she's a loud, dirty, boozy girl." Okay, we go on to our first of our common words with what may be unusual origins. That's trivial. Comes from the plural of trivium, the Latin trivia for three and the via for way, so 3 ways. So how did that come to get the adjective trivial, meaning unimportant? 3 ways to unimportant seems most unusual. Well, in medieval universities, the basic introductory course had 3 parts to it: grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And those 3 parts were known as the trivium. So if you started at university, you started with the trivium, and the older members of the university looked down upon these newcomers as doing something which was, well, trivial. Yeah, if you look at one of the antonyms of trivial, you get crucial, and that comes from the Latin crux, meaning a cross. If you look at a signpost at a crossroads, you've got pointing in 4 directions. And so you've got crucial, 4 ways, and trivia, 3 ways. Genuine. Latin genu meant knee. So how did a knee come to mean genuine? Well, it seems that in ancient Roman times, a father would take a child, a newborn child, and put it on his knee, and that was a sign to the world that he regarded the child as his own, and that child was genuinely his child.
Wow. It's a convoluted path.
Yes. You might know of other words such as genuflection, where bending of the knee, genuflection. Thus, this is the only Latin suffix I know which is turned into a word. The first mention of an idea about having would have been a horse and cart in those days, travelling the streets and paying passengers as it went along, came from way back in 1661. The famous French scientist and author Blaise Pascal put forward the idea. But it wasn't until 1823 that in Paris, there was a new means of transport called the voiture omnibus. The voiture means vehicle, omni all, and bus on the end of a Latin word meant for, F-O-R. So voiture omnibus was vehicle for everybody.
Yeah.
And so it began operating in Paris, and it was in contrast to the stagecoach. In order to be assured of a seat on a stagecoach, you had to book in advance. And maybe you could turn up and maybe you'd be lucky enough to get a seat, but it wouldn't be guaranteed. By the mid-1830s, the omnibus idea had taken off in London, and they dropped the voiture. They simply called it omnibus. And then later on, when machines came in, became the autobus. But it wasn't until the 1930s that bus by itself was introduced into dictionaries. Canvas and canvas, they're both the same words. This is where they came from. Latin cannabis, and the adjective was cannabaceous, which would be hempen, and into the French canavas, and eventually into the English as canvas. So what happened in the 16th century, it was a custom to get a canvas sheet, to put somebody on it and have people around the edges and toss that person in the air. It was done as a game, but it was also done as a punishment. So if you were canvassed, you were tossed in the air, and then it came to mean criticised severely, and then it came to mean discussing why you were criticised severely, and then it came to mean discussing an issue, and then it came to mean proposing something for discussion, and it kept evolving until it meant examining and discussing. And by the 19th century, it had come to mean seeking support for a matter or a person or a party. And that's when the verb added the extra S on the end. So that's the modern canvas. So if you get a visit from somebody from a political party, someone you don't like and someone you would never vote for, and you wish they hadn't come and you'd like to get rid of them, you could, of course, think about getting a canvas sheet and tossing them in the air. Or you might simply say to them, what have you been smoking?
Where's the actual link with cannabis? I mean, in meaning.
Sorry, what's that?
How is the link with cannabis, with canvas?
Well, it just came from Greek through the Latin, through the French, and then from the French into the English. And it's just the English just pronounced it as canvas. Chanavaz became canvas. Why the B became a V, well, that's just the way that letters changed pronunciation over the years. And
so what
I could probably help you out a little bit there, Danny, because in Greek, what we pronounce as B is actually pronounced V.
Yep.
Alpha, Vita.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right. Yep. The dictionaries will also tell you that the word hemp came from cannabis, presumably through Northern Europe, through the Germanic languages, and it just changed its name, its spelling, and its pronunciation. It's hard to believe, but that's what the experts say in the dictionaries of etymology.
But what did cannabis mean in Latin?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
But simply the name of the plant. Where the Greeks got cannabis, why they called it cannabis, I don't think anybody knows.
So did the sheet, was the sheet made of hemp? Was that?
Yeah, it was hemp.
That's the link, Bob.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was the step you missed, Danny.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Volatile. Now, volatile, well, it can mean lively, or it can mean for a liquid evaporating rapidly. And it all comes from the Latin volare and the French voler, which means to fly. And originally, it meant, it was a noun, and it meant a creature that flies. And it was also the word given to birds as a whole. So if you're talking about volatile a few centuries ago, you've been talking about birds.
Mm.
By 1650, it had taken on the additional meaning of something to do with the temperament. I suppose you could say that somebody who was volatile would fly off the handle.
Yeah.
Although that expression, fly off the handle, is an American one from about the 19th century, and it was all to do with an axe, or the head of an axe flying off a handle.
Yeah.
Danny, with that being birds, so is that where avian now comes from, that same word?
Well, the Latin word for bird was avis, A-V-I-S. So
Yeah.
avian comes from Latin, yes.
I wondered, in Dutch too, the Dutch call birds vogel. Vogel is a bird in Dutch, may be related to that.
Yep. Yeah, quite possibly came from there as well. Now, the French is a bit like English. There are some words which have two meanings. Voler not only means to fly, it also means to steal. So if you were walking down the street in Paris and you heard somebody yelling out, "Au voleur, au voleur," they're not saying anything to do with flying, just that somebody had just stolen their purse. Neighbour, from the Old English, nay meaning nigh or near, and geboer, which meant a boor. At that time, we're talking about 1,000 years ago, a geboer, a boor, was a peasant or a tenant farmer. But then later on, it came to take on the meaning of a rough and bad-mannered person. Now, when the Normans invaded in 1066, the old feudal system was replaced. The word boer was sort of lost, but then it was revived again around about 1550. It was readapted from the Dutch and the German. And the word boer in those languages at the time meant a peasant or a rustic. And in modern terms, when we talk about a boor, we talk about somebody who is, well, bad-tempered, rough, bad-mannered. I don't know about your neighbours, but ours are excellent, so who was living next to you or not?
They're nigh, but they're not boorish.
Belfry, it's there because it's a bit confusing, perhaps. It's got nothing to do with bells. It comes from the French belfry, and a belfry was a defensive tower. Not the slightest connection with the bells.
Mm.
So if they're bats in the belfry, there are actually bats in a defensive tower. You know those ones they used to have, they push them up against the walls of castles so they could climb up into the tower and be level with the top of the castle and fight from there.
Mm.
Picnic. French verb piquer, meaning to pick, and nick meant nothing whatsoever. Originally, it was a meal in which people were invited to bring along nothing whatsoever, or to bring anything, and not bring anything particular, just bring anything they felt like bringing. And originally it was indoors, and eventually after some decades or so, it went outdoors, and so all picnics are now outdoors. So originally it simply meant bring nothing whatsoever, nothing particular, and just bring anything. Now the word pique, you might also know, is coming to English, meaning to excite or to arouse, especially by a provocation, a challenge, or a rebuff. It can also mean pride. And if you get a feeling of pique, that's a transient feeling of wounded vanity or resentment, a fit of pique. And they both come from another French verb. This time piquer means to prick or to sting. And you probably know also piquant, food which is regarded as piquant, agreeably stimulating to the taste, or maybe you can say it's spicy.
Yeah.
And piquant came into the English language in 1616, and three other words which came in the same year, which just happened to be the year that Shakespeare died: raspberry, showroom, and puppy dog. This is one that surprised me. Fellow comes from the Old Norse philagi. Now the phil, or the fey, first two letters, meant a fee, in other words money, and the lag, that's the base of the word in English, lay. So a fellow, a philagi, was originally one who lays down money in a joint undertaking. So once again, it's another word which has completely lost its original meaning. So these days, fellows don't necessarily have to have anything to do with money. Right, the last of these common words, clue, coming from the old English spelling of C-L-E-W. A clue was a ball of thread. You remember the story of Theseus in the Minotaur, how Ariadne gave Theseus a ball of thread which he unwound as he went into the labyrinth to find and fight and kill the Minotaur, and by means of that ball of thread he was able to find his way back out of the labyrinth. And that is the origin of how a clue came to be anything you can follow to get a solution. Now, next section. Does anybody know the name of this bear?
Brown bear.
This is
Something wrong, isn't it?
this is a bear who's known as Gladly. Notice the eyes. Can you see how the eyes are? This is Gladly, the cross-eyed bear.
Right.
Now this is a mondegreen. Has anybody ever heard of a mondegreen?
Yes.
Yep.
Right, so you might be able to tell me where Gladly the cross-eyed bear comes from. Well,
No, can't work it out.
comes from a hymn.
Christian hymn, that's right, Gladly the cross-eyed bear.
Oh, dear.
Very good.
In
Well done, Bob.
1954, an American author, Sylvia Wright, wrote an article in a magazine, Harper's Bazaar, in which she told the story of how when she was a child in church and the congregation was singing Gladly the cross-eyed bear, she thought they were talking about Gladly the cross-eyed bear. There was no name in language, no word in the English language to describe what was a misunderstanding, or if you like, a slip of the ear. And so she came up with a new name and she called it Mondegreen. And this is where she got it from. The Scottish song, The Bonny Earl of Moray. They've slain the Earl of Moray and laid him on the green. So she on the green and introduced it to the world, and the article in the magazine got a lot of attention, and it was soon spread all over America and then around the world. And if you look on the internet these days and look up Mondegreen, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of examples. Most of them, I think, are spurious. They're just people thinking that, taking the line of a song and thinking if somebody made a mistake, maybe this is what they would have heard. Anyway, I've picked out a few examples. First one's another hymn, Lead On, O Kinky Turtle. Now, the next three are from popular songs from, well, last century. The first one, do you remember 60 years ago there was a television show from America, a series called Davy Crockett?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and there's a bit of a craze all around Tasmania or Australia or the world perhaps, with around wearing these coonskin hats. Yeah, oh, Joe she had one. And there was a song, the TV show always started with Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier.
Yeah.
Part of the song was killed him a bar when he was only 3. The bar was the American pronunciation for bear.
Yeah.
Killed him a bear when he was only 3.
Yeah.
23 years ago, was an American author who wrote a book, and she called it The Other Reindeer, and it was all about Olive, all the other reindeer. It was a big hit in America. It was a bestseller. As for Bob Dylan, whether he's ever had ants in his pants, I don't know. But you also get mondegreens in other languages, of course, so that our roles became the pink aeroplane. And I read about one character who said that when he was a student in his maths class, and the teacher introduced the theorem Archimedes' theorem, he thought that the teacher was talking about taking tea in Archimedes' harem. Now, it's actually part of the language that over the years words have changed because people have heard them and mistaken exactly what they were, and from the old words came a new word, and here are some examples. Oh no, first of all, I forgot the reverse mondegreen. Do you know the song Mersey Dates?
Yep.
Okay, this is where you start with the funny words and you got to work out what the real words originally were.
Yeah.
There was a big hit back in 1943. Does anybody need a translation?
No.
Everybody's got it?
Mm-hmm.
That's one from my childhood, yes.
I remember it, yes. So here are the words which changed their pronunciation and then their spelling over the years.
Mm.
In eek meant other, another name.
Mm.
Oh, spit and image, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are plenty more like that. So it's now, can you see what these 4 words have in common? 4 ancient words, Old English. Well, they were subject to a process known as metathesis. Meta, in this case, the Greek words, meta here meaning change and thesis meaning place. What happened was that when they were spoken, the sound of the letters changed place, so that those 4 words became bird, horse, third, and curd.
Oh.
Yeah, just over the years. Yeah.
Amazing.
And quite a few others like that. I mentioned right back at the start, we had quirl being used for curl in the Midlands of England. That actually was a Dutch word, krull, K-R-U-L, and that changed to curl. So that's another one subject to metathesis. Now, out of all the words which are inclined to be mispronounced these days. I think this is one of the most common.
Horrible.
Arcs. Hear that quite often. We have a family member who asks questions. The funny thing about,
every time.
yeah, the funny thing about this one is that arcs was the original pronunciation.
Oh.
Because in Old English, the word was arxiad, and that became arcs, and then by metathesis, it became ask.
So all those people that ask questions are actually correct.
Hold on.
Either that or they're ancient.
Full marks, yeah.
Okay, now we come to the next section on rare words. Recently, Joe and I came across a new author, Edmund Crispin, who wrote 9 novels between 1944 and 1958. And they're all detective novels, and we found them to be extremely interesting. Edmund Crispin, by the way, is not his real name, that's a pseudonym. His real name was Bruce Montgomery, and you may not know the name, but you may know his music. He was a musician, he was in fact a composer. He used to write a lot of church music and concertos and things like that, but he became most famous because he wrote film music. He wrote music for something like 40 or 50 films. And the most famous films that he wrote, the one which got his name in big letters on the screen, were the Carry On series.
Yeah.
Carry On. And the film Carry On Sergeant was on TV a couple of weeks ago, and I recorded it just to make sure that his name was there, and it was in big letters. And so he must have been pretty famous at the time. He also wrote the music for the Doctor series, Doctor at Large, and so on. All very popular for 60, 70 years ago. The thing that why I'm talking about Edmund Crispin is that in these novels, part of his writing style is to introduce words which are very rare. And I've had to get out the dictionary to look up quite a few of them, because they're either words I've never seen before, or they're words which I may have seen, but I've forgotten the meaning of, because you just don't come across them very often. So what I'll do is show you these 10 words I've picked out, and see how many you can, know the meaning of.
And I want to make a point here. Imagine coming up with these words in a detective mystery fiction. You had to lie in bed with the dictionary by your side.
Yeah, sleep on it.
Yes. Does anybody recognise any of the words? Anyone seen them before?
I'm completely ignorant.
Yep. I think I've seen Sutler before, but I couldn't quite remember what it was. And Epicene, I've seen.
Yeah,
Epicene.
Epicene was one.
Military, I think. Yeah.
Wouldn't have a clue.
But to be able to explain them, yeah. Okay, we'll look at these 3 because they are connected in a way. Combination and minatory both come from the Latin minare, meaning to threaten, and that's also the origin of the word menace. Now, combination means, or synonym is denunciation. It's also a word connected with the Church of England, where it means a threat of punishment or vengeance. And there is a church service in the Church of England on Ash Wednesday. It's called a recital of prayers on Ash Wednesday. So that's combination. Minatory means threatening, or having a menacing quality. And objurgation, coming from ob, meaning against, and the JUR give you a clue that it's got something to do with the law, you know, jurisdiction, jury, and justice, and so on. And if you felt, had a feeling of objurgation, it meant you felt so strongly against something that you were prepared to take it to the highest court in the land.
So these are proper words or words that he's made up?
No, these are words. You find them in the dictionary.
Oh, yeah.
Just they're rare, extremely rare. Now, he could have used synonyms. He could have had denunciation instead of commination.
Mm-hmm.
But he just liked to use, I suppose, means of showing that he's different from all other detective writers. Maybe he's just showing off.
I think there should be more of it. I think these words should be used. And
yeah, well, the only way to make them less rare is to keep using them.
Yep.
And I want to have a little plug here, Bob, just on what you've said, because beautiful, beautiful words like oleaginous, for example, are never, I mean, it means oily, and it's onomatopoeic, isn't it? And yet nobody ever uses oleaginous.
No, and it adds such richness to the language, doesn't it?
And the scare is that they'll be lost forever just from lack of use.
That's right, yeah.
And you mentioned the richness of the language, that takes them back to extreme and extremely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right, incunabulum. It comes from the Latin word cunae, which means a cradle, or it can also mean swaddling clothes. Incunabulum is an early printed book, especially one printed before 1501. And evidently there was something like 30,000 books which exist as incunabulums, printed before 1501. So because it comes from cradle, it also means the first infancy. So these early books, incunabulum, because they were the first printed books. And there is an English word which comes from incunable, with a B and then LE on the end to replace the Latin. Epicene, having characteristics of both sexes or of neither sex. And coming also to mean of indeterminate sex. Now, I'd like to introduce you to an epicene pronoun, thon. Now, this appeared in the Merriam-Webster dictionary in 1934, and it lasted in the dictionary until 1961 through 3 editions, and then because it didn't catch on, it was dropped from the dictionary. What it was somebody's attempt to produce a pronoun which could replace he, she, and it. And thon was an abbreviation of that one.
That's interesting that wasn't taken up, because the LGBTQI community uses they, as,
yes.
which is irritating to say the least. When if there was already a word there, it's a shame they didn't take it.
Yep, well, it just didn't catch on. In fact, these down here below, they are among the more than 80 words which people have suggested over the years to replace he, she, or it as the singular third person pronoun. There's his, hisa, him, hish, hiram, she. None of them caught on. So what we've got today is around about probably 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, we, when people thought that it's time to stop saying he for everything, and that the feminine she should be shared just as much as he, so we had he/she. that didn't catch on, and what did catch on was they. So it's not just the gay community. You find it all over the world these days, they, when it could be he or she or it. But I've read that using they in that sense has been around for a few centuries. It's only just in the last, say, 20 years that it's really taken off, and you just hear it all the time these days. But the only time I find it a bit annoying, but the time it's really annoying is when you find in, for instance, a report of a football match, and all the people who engage in the football match are male, and instead of saying he, they say they. Either because they're lazy, or most likely because they're ignorant, or because it's just the word which is taken over, and so they just use it. So we're stuck with it.
The word zon, I want to bring zon back.
It does seem so simple alternative to what's happening now.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't suppose I'll be considered a representative.
If you do something
about that. If you see nonage, you'll probably think straight away of nonagenarian and nonadjacent, 90-year-old and 90th. But in fact, it's virtually the opposite. Nonage is a period of youth. Period of minority. In the Middle English in the 15th century, it meant if you're a nonage, you're in a minority or under 21. And nonage can also mean lack of maturity. So it's got nothing to do with the Latin novem, from which we get nonagenarian and so on. It's simply non-age. Divagation means wandering or straying from a course or subject. Diverging or digression comes from Latin dis, apart, and vagary, to wander. And vagary is also the origin of words such as vagabond, vagary, which originally meant a journey, and also extravagant. If you're extravagant, you're wandering away from what you really ought to be doing. Divagation came into the language in 1599, and some other words which occurred in 1599: accurate, coconut, crabby, delirious, latecomer, leapfrog, soggy, one which surprised me, wonder worker, and the phrase breathing space.
Oh,
yeah, 1599. A sutler is a civilian provisioner to an army post. And Shakespeare used sutlers in Henry V. The character Pistol said, "I shall be sutler unto the camp, and profits will accrue." It comes from the Dutch svetler, which came from a German word which originally meant a sloppy worker. Sutlers got a very bad reputation because they're charging high prices and swindling people in the army camps. Logomachy is logo, you probably realise this word. Logomachy is a dispute about words, or a controversy marked by verbiage. It comes from the Greek makasthoi, meaning to fight. So it's a fight over words. Unlike a lot of Greek words, it hardly gets a mention in English or any other language. The only two which appear to exist are heresimac and normakia. Can you guess what heresimac means?
Something about fighting heretics.
Yeah, yes. The heresimac is an active opponent of heresy or heretics. So the Spanish inquisitors, for instance, would have been Max. And Normakia, the NAU might give you a clue that it's something to do with the sea or with water. And Normakia was the ancient Roman spectacle representing a naval battle. I believe they used to flood the Colosseum and have Normachias to entertain the crowd.
Wow. Mm.
One of my favourites, Atrabilius. It means melon.
Is that how you're feeling now, Mal, after your bad night, Atrabilius?
No, he's cheered up a lot since then. He's pretty cheerful now. Of course, Atrabilius means melancholic, gloomy. And that's how it started out. Now it's come to mean more or less ill-natured, peevish, irritable, unfriendly. Comes from the Latin atra, meaning black, and bilus for bile.
I love it.
The Greek melancholy is also the same, black bile. And as one of the bile being one of those humours that people were supposed to have, which made them feel gloomy. Now, there are very few words, there are a lot of words which have taken on the Greek word for black. Melon, melanoma, for instance, Melanie, the name Melanie, the tree Melaleuca, which means black-white. But very few words have taken on the Latin word for black. One is atrament, and that is a very dark substance, or sort of a black substance. So the ink that you get from a squid, for instance, I presume would be called atrament. There is another word which starts with ATR, which you know. So the atra there means black, and the ocular, eye. Now, it doesn't mean that if you got a black eye, you look atrocious. If you're something atrocious with something which has a black appearance, or something which appears to be bad, where black is taken as bad at that stage. So that's how it started out. Something atrocious had the appearance of being, of looking bad. Right, that's the end of the rare words. I hope you remember them all.
Yep.
I'd like you to introduce you to this character in our last section, a French author of novels, plays and poems, Jules Renard, who was also something of a philosopher, and he was the one who came up with this expression. Yeah, I like that one. And I liked it so much that I copied down some of the other sayings that Jules Renard had to say, which he wrote down, and these are translated from French, of course. So I'm going to give you 7 of them. Laziness is nothing more than the habit of resting before you get tired. Love is like an hourglass, with the heart filling up as the brain empties. If one were to build the house of happiness, the largest space would be the waiting room. Writing is the only way to talk without being interrupted.
Yes.
Not everybody can be an orphan. Yes. And if I were to begin life again, I should want it as it was. I would only open my eyes a little more. And so
his name, Renard, or spelt Renard, is pronounced Renard, is it?
yeah, it's French for fox.
Fox.
Okay, Renard, yeah, okay, thanks.
seen English books called Reynard the Fox.
Yeah.
Jules Renard, yeah.
Renard.
They put a Y in it for Reynard, don't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah. So we'll finish with what is probably his most famous aphorism, one which I reckon you know, and one which I think could be a motto for University of the Third Age and all its adherents.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
So that's my last word. If somebody's got some questions, or if somebody's got some words they'd like to share with us.
Well, Danny, would you like to press your red button at the top that says stop sharing?
Yeah.
Beautiful. And then we're all back again.
And that was fun, Danny. That was
Yeah.
fun.
Interesting.
My word.
Most enjoyable.
I've got a word that seems I'm talking on Antarctica in an upcoming U3A session. Sastrugi. Danny, do you know anything about that sculpted ice that you get in the Antarctic called sastrugi?
You spell it?
Sastrugi. Sastrugi. Or sastrugi, maybe. It's possibly Norwegian or something, I imagine.
I'll see if it's in the Oxford
A good book.
Dictionary. Yeah, I've never heard of it before. So
we tripped over it and slid on it, and sastrugi is a
SAS.
terrain.
What is it? SAS?
Sastrugi. Sastrugi or sastrugi. I presume that's how it's pronounced. I have no idea.
not in this book at all. Was.
All words, there you go.
Well, we do know, don't we, that the Inuit, for example, have so many words for ice and snow. It may be a word taken from there directly.
Certainly sounds like a Canadian word. I'll look it up. It'll be on the internet, Frank. I'll look it up and get it to you. Yeah. And yeah.
Right.
Yeah, somewhere.
My favourite words from the world of music, the onomatopoeic word ululate.
Yes.
Yes.
You can feel that word, can't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Edna. You need to unmute.
Okay, did it.
Yes.
I was trying to do it up on the picture. Danny, that was extremely interesting. Thank you very much. I wonder if all those beautiful long words that are disappearing is just because society is shortening everything. Time. We don't have time to pronounce long words anymore.
Yes. It's because of, well, television for a start, and get words which are used in one television program, and all of a sudden you find it used in others, and then it gets on the internet and it's onto Facebook and so on. You just, words these days can spread over the world so quickly.
And texting,
sorry, Cole.
Texting has bastardised our language.
Yes. You know how the act of giving has turned into the act of gifting?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Very annoying.
Yeah, do you know how that's happened?
No, it's just metathesis, perhaps. People just getting wrong word, just happens like that. The one which annoys me most, the pronunciation of congratulations. The T is being replaced by a D.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
You listen to Late Night Live with Philip Adams. He was a very smart joker. He's an excellent communicator and so on. Every time he uses that word, he uses it with a D, congratulations. I think it's maybe in 20 years' time, everybody will be saying congratulations.
Not me, if I'm
Not I.
No.
Yeah. And I'm going to insist on saying particularly and not particularly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Danny, one question I have is, it seems to be increasingly the case that us becomes us. The fuzzy S. What is there any etymological justification for that?
The only justification I think would be laziness.
Right.
Because us is easier to say than us.
Right.
Little less effort involved in moving the tongue around. Us, yeah, it is a little bit easier. Probably the same reason why people say kilometre instead of kilometre.
Yeah.
Although I can't see that kilometre is any easier or faster to say than kilometre.
Well, look at arcs. Arcs is terribly hard to say. It's amazing that carries.
Yeah, that was a revelation.
Yes. Apropos that, I know somebody who cannot say laksa soup. It's always laska soup.
I wanted to make a comment about words that don't catch on, and those words that do catch on and go like wildfire. And Reese introduced me to a word that within seconds of me reading it in something she sent me, I heard it on the radio and I hear it all the time now, and that's the word pivot. And the coronavirus word, and nobody used it until March this year. Well, not very often anyway. You hear it over and over again. So something attracts people to a word, attracts a lot of people to a word, and that puts it right bang smack in the middle of our
spreads around the world. Yeah. Now, virus was a Latin word, originally meant poison.
What word were we talking about?
Virus.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah, virus. Originally, I think it meant poison, particularly of snakes, snake poison. Got its modern meaning a couple hundred years ago, I think. It is not to be connected with virile.
No.
Virile comes from the Latin word vir, V-I-R, which means man. Virile, like a man, like puerile, like a boy. So, like an infant. We just got a couple of minutes before, if you can hang on till past. I've got a few extra words here which you might be interested in. Pajamas. It's a Persian word. Persian for pa, which means leg, and jama means garment. So it became singular, pajama, and then it became pajamas after that. What about bumptious?
That's a good word.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite. Bumptious, self-assertive, and often noisily. There's no known origin of it, but it's suspected it's simply bump. You imagine somebody in a crowded room going from one side of the crowded room to the other and bumping people out of the way. Such would be a bumptious person. We mentioned Jules Renard, Renard meaning fox. Look up the word toddle, and again it says OU, origin unknown, from about the 1600. Whether it's got something to do with Todd. Todd was an old Scottish word for fox. Toddling is something to do with the movement of a fox.
Possibly. And then a toddler coming from that.
Yeah, toddler came along in 1793.
Okay.
Later, yeah. And another word I like is chameleon.
Chameleon.
Like the leon means lion, and I wondered with the CHME.
That's Richard Lionheart.
Which is the French word for camel, but it doesn't. It comes from the Greek shamai, which means on the ground. So the chameleon was a lion on the ground, evidently because the Greeks thought it looked a ferocious looking thing, as ferocious as a lion. So a chameleon is a brown lion. And it took on its modern meaning of changing, or somebody who changes his opinion and so on, in 1586. It was used by King James VI when he was, must have been King of Scotland. And that's the first known figurative use of chameleon.
Mm.
And you know, of humus in the garden, humus is a Latin word which means earth. That's where we get humility and humble. On that note, I'll bid you a humble goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Danny.
Thanks, Danny. That was great.
That was excellent.